That's what he made last night.
Oh, yeah.
So, but he's never even really done that. So, good evening.
Good evening. What's going on?
Bad storm.
Oh, you had a storm?
Bad one, yeah. We had a really bad storm.
Well, I thought we were going to have one. There was a bad one in northeastern part of Rutherford County last night, heading up into the upper part of Cleveland. And then it went through the upper part of Lincoln, and then it went through Iredell and went north of us, thank goodness, because it was 60 miles an hour. It knocked a lot of power lines and trees down and had nickel-sized hail in it, but it missed us. It went just north of us.
Ours wasn't that bad, but it was good.
So, but yeah, it's awfully hot in this part of the world. So,
yeah.
It's been bad, but I'm glad that it missed us. I hate that it hit the people that it hit, but I'm glad that it missed us. We're struggling with the heat. It's bad enough, but knock wood. One good thing about here, we're on the peninsula that goes into the lake where the jetty is for the city of Charlotte that pulls the water out of Lake Norman. We have underground utilities, and they keep them on all the time, because if they don't, the city of Charlotte doesn't have any water. So that helps us keep our power on all the time. But now, my place in Lake Lure, my power's out there more than it's on in that part of the world. Every time a storm comes through, the wind even picks up. We're without power up there. That winter storm, what was that? In the winter of 1819, that tore down all the trees in that part of the world. They still got temporary lines up 3 years later, because those places are so mountainous and steep. They can't get them all replaced, and so it's tough up there this time of year. You may not have any air conditioning and water and power, so these storms are playing havoc. So I'm here at home at Lake Norman because we got power here. I guess I'll head back to work sometime later on. What's the COVID crisis? We got a COVID crisis in our office, so as soon as it's over, I guess I'll go back. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the final session of MELS 603 Masters for the summer of 2021. I'm going to turn things over to your two resident principal experts to run the final case study tonight. I do want to say I appreciate everybody's participation this summer. Got a couple that haven't got everything turned in yet. Make sure you get your OMA in by Saturday, and we'll work on the points and other things. Please remember, if you don't get your evidence in this summer, then I'll have to give you an incomplete, and you'll have to complete this in the fall rather than take 604. And Dr. Sanders is looking forward to seeing all of you this fall. So everybody get your work in if you can. Let me know if you can. We only have a couple left, and so we've done well this summer. So let me share my screen quickly, and we'll look and see where we are at our weekly schedule for the last time. And so we are at week 11, the 28th of July. We have case study 4, inclusion. And to wrap up, I don't really have anything other than thanking you all for choosing Gardner Webb, and it's been a pleasure working with you this summer. So I'm going to turn it over to the good doctors now, who are going to run the last case study of the evening. And I'm going to sit back, relax, and listen.
And I don't think I got your list last week when you said who started tonight. Dr. Caton, did you have that?
I do not. I'm sorry.
I know you guys know who starts tonight.
I know who got. So Kitty's group goes.
Is it Kitty's group? Yes.
Then
Kitty's
Heather's group, then Matt's group, then America's group, in that order: Kitty, Heather, Matt, America.
Okay, so that's what I didn't have all of those. All right, Kitty, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Kitty, we belong to you. We're your group.
All right, so I think Ashley, you're going to share your screen, and Claire's going to start.
Okay, Kitty, are y'all able to hear me and see me?
Yes.
Very good. I'm at Camp Caraway, so I told everybody I wasn't sure how my stuff was gonna go. I'm chaperoning this week.
Guess I had it pulled up. Can y'all see my screen?
No, not the case study.
That's so weird. Oh, right there. It's right behind. It's hiding from me. I knew I had it open. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'll start us off. So this one, we're talking about this underachieving school where they've hired some special things to go on now. We've got 2 admin, 3 specialists, 28 teachers for 300 students. Over the course of the case study, it's talking about a scenario where you've got a teacher with an inclusion class, and the Parents Association brings forth a concern that not all the children are being served equitably. What they seem to have noticed is that the teacher is quote unquote catering to the kids that have special needs and is not really serving the students with general ed is their point of view. It's also their perception that the general ed kids are being used to teach the lower kids and that the teacher's not even always doing that. So when this is brought to the principal's attention, they decided to send in one of the 3 specialists to observe the classroom, as well as calling the teacher in for a conversation. With having that conversation with the teacher, and then when the specialist came back and told the point of views of several teachers in several classrooms, that was when a big discussion kind of came on about inclusion in the classroom, how it was being utilized, how things were being perceived by the teacher, and then possibly even by the parents. Another thing there was that some big tension was exposed between teachers because of having differing opinions about how they thought that inclusion should be utilized in the classroom, as far as what the teacher should be doing and what the kids should be receiving.
All right. So what is the path that Eugenia should take? She should do a formal observation, since parents have actually given a formal complaint. Then after she does this formal observation, she should do her post-conference with Sylvia and bring up the concerns that the parents have voiced and discuss those with her. Find out what she could do differently in the classroom, explain to her maybe some of the laws that she's not adhering to. And then she needs to follow up. She needs to be doing these things. She needs to know what's going on in her school. She needs to know what, she doesn't need to pass this on to an assistant principal or another teacher or anything like that. She needs to know what is going on. She needs to follow up with another observation after a certain amount of time so that she can find out what's actually going on in this classroom, do walkthroughs to find out, formal observations are great, but everybody can do a dog and pony show. So you need to do those walkthroughs so you can find out what is actually going on day to day. Look into expanding the inclusion model that's so that an EC teacher is also available. All right, and how might the principal approach this in future meetings with their teachers? Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? Define the roles of the teacher and the specialist. The specialist is there to help the teacher. The teacher runs the classroom. The specialist, the inclusion teacher, is there to help the teacher and help the students that that need this extra help. The specialist is not there to run the classroom. And once again, go into the classroom to see what's happening to verify if what the parent is saying is really happening. Talk to all teachers about IDEA law, and that is there is not an option. And remind them that this doesn't require inclusion. Just go over what this law is, that Students with disabilities be educated in the least restrictive environment, and that it's appropriate. It begins in the regular classroom, and these children should be educated in the regular classroom until such time that they cannot be served in these classrooms with, whatever is being used. They need a satisfactory outcome, but if they can't achieve that in the regular classroom, that's when you actually can do something else.
Larry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
All right, it says, is one point of view more correct than the other and why? And, with the parents' point of view, some feel like their kids are not receiving the quality education, while the special needs children were. Their children had to help the other children in the class deliver the instruction. And then I guess we get a wide range of views of what's going on in different classrooms. And, is one point of view more correct than the other and why? And, with Sylvia, you can tell that she's passionate about teaching. She's passionate about her students. She works closely with the students in her class. And then she also values those regular kids, and she wants them to have that opportunity. Some people feel like, the best way to demonstrate you've learned something is by teaching it. And, that gives them the opportunity to show the mastery as the ultimate way to learn. And then Sergio, he seems to value the expertise of the special education teacher, use them all the time. And then some of the other teachers felt like felt special needs students needed to be taught by a capable teacher. And they made sure to cover the curriculum. Then you get to Ismail, and the needs of the special needs students needed to be overseen by the special needs teachers. And this was actually something where he had the approach of saying that it needs to be done outside of that classroom in another classroom setting, which basically scratches inclusion total. With all the points of view, they're valid, should be addressed. Separating students is not what the inclusive classroom is. And then also it doesn't reflect the mission of their school.
And what type of or kind of collaboration from the children's families might the principal and the teachers propose? We thought that no meeting should be happening between any of the parents, kind of like coercing and forming stronger opinions together. We wanted to increase the knowledge of what inclusion is for all of the parents by hosting maybe like a workshop or a parent night, so that they can get more informed on that and then maybe form their opinions separately. EC teachers should make regular contact with their parents on the caseload, just to be touching base with those students that have services provided for them. And on the flip side, EC teachers also don't just serve the EC students. They are in the classroom to help all students, but most specifically can help out with the ones that they're more familiar with. And we thought that getting input from all the parents with their children involved would be kind of appropriate at this point, as long as everyone was together and had been informed. And what should Ismail do? He can be used in a PD to support teachers and share his depth of knowledge to those teachers. And he can explain how to utilize testing in the classroom to reach all of the students and how to use that technology in the classroom, not just specifically kind of catering to the lower students or catering to any sort of students, but reaching all the students as a whole, making sure that they all have their own standards for what might be proficient. And ISMAL could visit PLCs to find strategies that are working and could share those during the professional development. And Sylvia might create a classroom letter, and she would first have to have permission, written approval from each of the parents that their student's picture could be shared, just to kind of show what goes on in the classroom, what's taking place maybe from day to day. Obviously, trying to avoid having a horse and pony show, but at the same time, just being a little bit more kind of candid with what's going on. And attend a PD to gain some scaffolding techniques and inclusion best practices and how to implement those in her classroom, and to use assessment data to track achievement for all students, not just the EC population of students, and just to try to utilize that blended learning and grouping. So change up her strategies with grouping students.
All right, so legal and ethical concerns, justice, that fairness, equity, and justice, just making sure that everybody is receiving a, the education that they deserve. All the laws are being followed, and that nobody feels like they're not being treated equitably. Care, relationships, collaboration, shared decision-making, and connections. That's not just with the students, that's also with faculty through PLCs, learning through PD, how to make connections, how to collaborate, things like that. But ultimately, making sure that you are showing care and building those relationships with all students, because ultimately that's what we're here for. Critique, explore both sides of the concern in order to make quality decisions for all students involved. Eugenia needs to make sure that she does her job and not passing it on to other people. Profession, accountability for student academics, making sure IEPs are followed. If there's 504s, that they're followed as well. They are getting equal access to quality education. Consider and evaluate the potential moral and legal consequences of decision-making. Making sure you're being socially aware, and making sure that, one thing when parents come to you, that you are only talking about their student and not other students in a classroom and things like that. So that's our presentation.
So I'm going to start you off, and I'm going to ask you a couple questions. My first question is, as the administrator or the principal of that school, you talked a little bit about, going in and looking at formal observations. However, I didn't see you say anything in your presentation about what would she see? What is she looking for? What do you think would be different? You talked a lot about inclusion, but what is that? What does that look like in a K-5 school in a classroom? What would she see?
In a K-5 school, she should see the inclusion teacher supporting what the regular ed teacher is doing and helping, like Ashley said, all students that are in the classroom, but especially any that are part of the inclusion program with an IEP. Maybe there is a group that is performing low, and she could be, that inclusion teacher could be helping there.
Okay.
But there is no support right now. Sylvia has regular ed students helping EC students.
Okay.
So
let me
if
stop.
she goes into the classroom, I guess she's going to be seeing, unless she's doing the dog and pony show, she's going to be seeing regular ed students helping EC students, which is possibly not giving those regular ed students their fair and equitable treatment.
Okay, so let me stop you for a little bit. In an ideal setting, you would have an inclusion teacher to come in. That's ideal. That's not what always happens, especially in a K-5, because many times you have students who are not already identified, as you know that. They're probably going through the process and things like that. So of course you would see that teacher, that regular teacher, working with groups of kids. You would hope that she has differentiated somehow, if that means that she's doing some guided reading or some guided math, and she's doing everything on different levels for all those students, correct? So one thing that you also didn't address is that what is one of the things that she talks about that she is doing for the higher level students in that classroom? What did she say? What did it say that she's doing, seeing that the higher level students are doing a lot of? Other than teaching, what else did it say that she's doing? Other than the higher level kids teaching the lower level kids?
She said overall that she felt like that they were already motivated and that they were showing proficiency on the things that she was giving them, and that they weren't necessarily needing that extra attention from her that she felt like other students were needing. And then in those conversations, also the fact that they were able to explain something to someone else was a big proof for them that the understanding was taking place, that comprehension level was higher because they were able to actually teach it to someone else.
And what materials did you see that she said that she's given to the kids? Did you remember that?
Worksheets, right?
Worksheets, workbooks. That's all she's doing. So is that equitable? Is that fair? And is it what is legal? Can you use a kid to tutor another student like that and just kind of put them in the corner? Can you do that?
No.
Not when it's inclusion and it's a special needs student who has a 504 and an IEP.
So,
may not be a 504. It's what you're trying to get at, Dr. Caton, is that if they're in the tier process and they don't really maybe have anything set for them to do. I guess that's where it does kind of get in a gray area where, a lot of people's pedagogy is let's pair high-low, let's pair, and that's where you get into the different types of grouping. So I guess without having the legal 504 or IEP tacked on to that student, any student can help any other student. And there's really nothing that mandates a teacher pushing a child to their full potential by just throwing them a worksheet. I mean, obviously we all have integrity and we want to push our students to the fullest potential, but I'm not aware, and I'm very new at this legal stuff, but of a law that really, other than your, code of ethics, like that it's illegal to give a kid a worksheet.
So it's not legal. It's not illegal to give them a worksheet. Correct. However, it would be very bad pedagogy. But I would say this, that, see, my brain just stopped on me. I was getting ready.
Good. I stumped you. You can just go on.
Yeah, sorry. No, what I was going to say is that when you're in a classroom and you're looking at different things, something that, it's what you have to do is you have to teach them on the grade level. You have to. And then you have to look at the student's IEP and fill in the gaps there. And that's where you hopefully will have your specialist to come in and do it. Some things that I really, really think is really good as a principal is something I call double dosing. And actually I did a lot of triple dosing is what I called it. And so when they're in that regular classroom, they are being exposed, your EC students are being exposed and given that regular curriculum because that's what they need. That's what they're going to have. And then for the inclusion part or either a pull out resource part, they're being double dosed, meaning that they're given the instruction as well in that area as what in that classroom. So for me, what I would do a lot of is I do guided reading in the classroom, and then I would do guided reading in addition to a I'm sorry, I just got distracted by Dr. Lamb, by being pulled out with their EC specialist. So they're double dosed. And then I would have them triple dosed by having them come in with a reading specialist. So like Dr. Lamb said, is an IEP a legal contract? Is that something that you have to adhere to?
Yes, absolutely.
Dr. Maraglia, I'm sorry.
No, I just have another question to take it in a little bit of a different direction. This case study, I mean, yes, we got a lot of things wrong here. And on your PowerPoint, you said that something like Eugenia's got problems, something along those lines on one of your very first PowerPoint pages. What is Eugenia's problem? What is this really all about?
She's not being a leader. She doesn't know what's going on in her school.
Thank you, Larry. You get the gold star today. That's what I was exactly wanting to hear. This whole case study is about how is she spending her time? What is she paying attention to? Because I'm sure you've all heard what you pay attention to is what is taken care of. That's what's important. And how is she operating her school on a day-to-day basis? So I'd love to hear from this group. When I ask those questions, what's coming to mind?
Sorry, can you clarify your question? Maybe
How do you think Eugenia's spending her time, or what is
her
she
office.
not doing, or conversely, what is she not doing that she really needs to do? When
She's
you
not
think
getting out in the hallways.
when you think of malfeasance and misfeasance and nonfeasance, we've been talking about that this whole semester. What are we seeing here?
She doesn't do anything. She's passing the buck.
Okay, so she's not
Getting out in the hallways or out in the classroom and finding out what's going on in her school. So she's not leading, like Larry said.
I mean, this goes way beyond the whole inclusion versus mainstream argument.
Yeah, because the presence of an administrator in the hallways and in the classrooms obviously is going to keep teachers on their toes, and it may prevent, like Dr. Caton was saying, a teacher always throwing a worksheet to the students who are exceeding academically. So I think it puts a little bit of more like accountability on teachers, because maybe I'm speaking for a lot of us and maybe you disagree, but regardless, if you know you're doing your job well, you pull your shoulders back a little bit more when an administrator walks in the room, and and the students do too. And so not I called it a horse and pony show, but not a dog and pony show always, but it does just instill that, just let's do the best that we're doing every single day. So it doesn't have to be a planned observation. It's just a popping in. Hey, what are we doing? Why are these kids over in the corner? Like, why are these kids working and these kids are playing around, or whatever?
Because that's her job. That's what they're paying. That's what she's getting paid to do. And
That's why those
Dr. Lamb,
walkthroughs would be important.
I know you just put something in the chat and I didn't see the whole, what you said. I haven't pulled it up yet, but that is her job, to be aware. And I also feel like, along with being aware, she's not really done a great job of increasing her knowledge of EC practice, the legalities that go along with that. She doesn't really seem to know what her specialist is doing. I mean, why is he not in the classroom? Yes, you guys were right. He needs to do things like PD and things of that nature. But at my school, the specialists are in the classroom every single day, all day long. They're not sitting in their office, doing this, that, and the other. They're co-teaching, or they're coaching.
Sorry, I was just
no. Go ahead.
You have to be the way that IEPs are written, and I'm high school, but I'm not sure if it's changing throughout the grade levels. But that the inclusion teacher must be providing that service at least like 85% of the time, or somewhere around in there.
It depends on what's written on the child's IEP.
But so I'm going to go story time for a second. But one year I had an inclusion teacher who's doing what you did. She sat in her room. She didn't come down to my math classroom. And I was a second year teacher. And of course, what you learn about special education in your undergrad is slim to none.
Right.
And, I was like, okay, I have a co-teacher, cool. And she never showed up. Well, the head of the EC department came down and asked, what she was doing, how things are going. And I said, well, she's never here. And she's like, you need to be saying something, because you are also responsible for that, making sure that she's in there, and that's when I really learned that they must be in the room and providing those services. And
well, again, it depends. And again, I don't like us going down that path right now, because this is so, like I said, this is so beyond EC. But it really depends on what the child's IEP said. There's some children that will leave the general classroom and go to resource, which is a pull-out setting, and the EC teacher would not come to that classroom. If a child's in an inclusion setting, the EC teacher is supposed to come to that classroom and help with co-teaching or different ways of handling that. But if it's in a true inclusion setting and that EC teacher isn't coming, that still goes back to the leader. The leader needs to be aware that that's not happening, and that's not your responsibility. That goes back to the principal. This still goes back to the principal being negligent and not doing what she's supposed to do to protect her children and to ensure that learning is occurring. And when I mentioned the specialist, I actually meant, I don't mean the EC teacher there. I mean the
Ismail.
gentleman. Yes, thank
Ismail.
you. Yes, that's who I was referring to. That yes, he can provide PD to teachers, but his rear end needs to be in the classroom too, helping to instruct and providing coaching for those teachers and modeling things for them. He's not just some special person that gets to walk the building. Again, it goes back to what's she paying attention to, how she's spending her time.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, just the approach that she took was something that I questioned, because I wouldn't call Eugenia in to talk to her. I would go down to her classroom and see what she's doing. That way I could make notes and come in and say, hey, I was in your classroom and this is what I observed, versus letting her come in and tell her story. And so it sounds like she's spending a lot of time in her office.
Because when you do that, when you call them in, they know you don't know. They know you haven't been in their classroom. You have no idea what they're talking about and if they're telling the absolute truth. So yes, it sounds like she's spending a lot of time in her office. And when she's in her office, she's not reading about EC laws. And she's not reading about what you should see going on in an EC classroom or anything of that nature. She is definitely guilty here of not having some sound day-to-day practices for her operation. Dr. Lamb, I know I can just look at you. I know you're wanting to jump in.
You made the salient point here is we've talked about negligence the whole semester. Misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance. She has exhibited all three. That's why we use this case study last. You should be able to identify, I don't mean tonight, out loud, I'm not going to give you a pop quiz, but you ought to be able to read back through this case and you ought to be able to identify the misfeasance, the malfeasance, and the nonfeasance. The malfeasance is they're breaking the law, and it's not close. You would not want to go to court with this one. The district would settle this one immediately, or I would, and I did. On one like this, we'd settle it immediately. But what I typed in the comments is I've had to ask principals, what were you doing that we weren't paying you for, that prevented you from doing what we were paying you for? You should have been on top of this. This touches everything. This touches, supervising personnel, inducting new people. When you hire somebody or when you assume somebody, when you walk into the building as a principal, even if you don't hire them, if you assume them, your job, of course, is to make the people that work for you successful. It's your responsibility to induct them and work with them and make sure they have what they need and the skill set that they need to be successful. That's not happening. Illegal things. Is it illegal to have kids teach other kids? If they have an IEP, it is, because that's a legal contract. Nowhere I've never seen an IEP that was written that said, we're going to have the smart kid teach your kid. That would not go well. I think about due process. What about due process? I would say that the regular ed kids are being punished without due process. It touches even due process. I would say it would be a punishment to have to do that. Now, when you get to be principal, it's a different day than 40, 50, 60 years ago. We don't have teaching principals anymore. They don't pay you to teach a soul. They pay you to make sure that teachers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And you cannot do that from your office or virtually or whatever. You can't do that. Now, a few years back, a very good friend of mine's high school principal in Charlotte, during my era and after I retired, she hung on a good while. She was at South Neck. And I was visiting with Maureen, and she said, it's the hardest thing we've ever had to do, but it's probably the best thing that's happened during my career. Now, I will tell you that I was smart enough to know this. I'd say Maureen Furr is. She said, we're now required to do a walkthrough in every teacher's classroom every day. She said initially, you know, we were just struggling to get that done with the administrative team that we had. South Meck had, you know, at that time, probably 2,800 students. But she had, what, 4, 5, 6 APs. But anyway, they were struggling to do that. But she said after a year, when they finally got it figured out, she said it had more impact on instruction and the culture of the school than anything she'd ever seen. That was being in every teacher's room every day. Back to what Dr. Maraglia said, you don't have any license, you have no purchase, you have no platform, you have no legitimacy to talk to teachers about what they are or aren't doing in their room if you hadn't been there. And they know you hadn't been there. They know when you're in there. They know. And so I won't use me as an example of anything but an idiot, but I can tell you many of the things that I did as a principal a long time ago, I still do now because it's just good practice. I still look in on classes. I was in on 2 last night. I still look in on the MELS classes. I buzz in from time to time. I'm not required to, but I still teach every semester. I teach in MELS every semester so that I know what's going on. I'm not using me as an example of anything but an idiot, but there are certain things in our business that are just standard, that are good practices. They follow the law, number one, and number two, but it's just good practice. And this case is about an incompetent principal that's not doing what they need to do. A teacher that is malpracticing on kids, denying due process to some and not fulfilling the legal contract of the IEP of others. You have other folks around the building who are, you know, who aren't stepping up because they're not being asked to or forced to or being held accountable to stepping up. And so kids are being malpracticed on all throughout the building. This is a classic case. Teacher's wrong here, principal's wrong here. We started out with our case studies this year with the teacher being wrong in the first one. Some of you didn't like that, but it was just the truth. The last case study that we did, the principal was wrong. It wasn't about a bad teacher, it was a bad principal. This is the whole gamut. Teacher wrong, faculty members wrong, principal wrong, everybody, the whole crowd, the whole bunch is going to be homeless. All of them going to lose their house. This is what happens. But now, I will say this, unfortunately, and I'll let the experts get back to work here. This is not as far-fetched as you think it is. Unfortunately, this happens more often than not with inclusion model. It is the most commonly misused practice in our profession, without a doubt, and that's why it's here. Each year when I go to the legal seminar that Richard Schwartz and Associates puts on, they have it at the McKimmon Center in Raleigh, which is the extension building for NC State University out on Western Boulevard, where I was an undergraduate a long time ago. They cover the 4 hot topics every year. The 4 case studies that we have in MELS 603 reflect the 4 hot spots. Believe it or not, these 4 that we did, this one being last, but being the hottest one, have been the same for the last 4 years in a row. These are going to be constant, folks. You think, well, you know, we're going to move on to something. Nope. It's been, these have been the hot 4 for the last 4 years running, and this one being the biggest one, where school districts have the most exposure and liability and get sued the most over is exceptional children, most specifically the inclusion model. This is it. This is going to be your day-to-day. Now, if you don't want to have to deal with this, you need to get into some other area of administration, maybe a content area like CTE or something. But if you're going to be a principal, these 4 things, most specifically this one, it's going to have to be on your radar every day.
And can I just go back to my point that I was trying to make when I was asking the questions is that, like you said, it's evident that she's not been in the classroom. but it's evident also that she doesn't know what good instruction looks like. You have got to know what good instruction looks like when you're in that classroom. And if you don't know what good instruction looks like, ask somebody. You should have some district people in your, in your county that you can ask questions, or you can go observe or something like that. There should be somebody or something that you can see, but if you don't know, you need to find out what good instruction should look like. You don't have to have all the curriculum answers, but you should at least know what it looks like.
And that goes back to, how is she spending her time? It's not just, it's getting out of her office, not only to see what's going on in her building, but learning about the things that she needs to strengthen her knowledge base on, whether it's law or good teaching or whatever the case may be. Is she's not operating efficiently and effectively, and it's to the detriment of the children.
All right, our next group, I think, is Heather. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Cyrus is going to bring it up. This is Todd speaking. You can hear me, yeah? Okay.
Yes, sir.
It's kind of hard to go after groups, like after everything's been said, you kind of evaluate what you were doing. It's funny, while he's bringing this up, these meetings of ours have gone from 7 o'clock, not here, our group, our cohort, from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And then finally this one started at 9:30. And we thought it was simple. When we started this, it was, she's guilty, move on. And which it is, but then as we started talking, we just found ourselves at midnight still talking about this thing. These case studies have been very rewarding for us as far as a group talking about things. One of the eye openers that I think was a little different than what was said in the group before, none of us are elementary school teachers. So kind of like you were just saying, we all find ourselves or feel that we're great teachers at our own levels, but we're not 100% sure what it looks like in an elementary school. And if we were to be put into an elementary school as assistant principal or principal, that's one of the things we'd have to bone up on real quick. Now, I think teaching is teaching, and some of that stuff we could kind of we would pick up on real quickly, but we still felt in our discussions a little bit off with that. We also found ourselves that we have situations and programs that we teach that dictate that students teach to each other. And we talked about that for a good bit, and about how, is it a best practice? Is it not a best practice? And it's probably not a best practice, but yet in some of our programs it's dictated. But what we fell on was the fact that this teacher was leaning on it to cover this inclusion issue, as opposed to using it as an actual strategy in her classroom. I think the other group said it great when they said, I guess, putting a kid in a corner and doing it that way. And once that happened, the illegal nature of what was going on took over. And we just decided, she needs to lose her house. The principal does. Put her in jail, take the teacher, put her in jail, lose her house, all that good stuff. And we started laughing about it because that's all you can do at that point. The principal lacks rituals, routines, and it made us kind of wonder what in the world was going on during pre-planning. As teachers, we're always like, good God, pre-planning, there's a million things that we go through and we do, and some of them we have to do, like going over the instrument for observations and stuff. But some of the legal things that have to come over with inclusion, we do in our school. And we kind of wonder what was going on there. It didn't seem like anybody knew what they were doing. These are the major questions that came out of it. And then we'll go through it question by question. Why does the school not have an established procedure? Even in inclusion classes, how are teachers ensuring the educational needs of students without disabilities are being met? So not just the inclusion kids, the injustice done to those students that were forced to teach the students as a way to do this. We kind of set our own scenario. We said maybe those kids tested and showed well maybe a week or two ago. Well, that's a week or two that they could be learning new stuff moving forward, but yet they're helping the teacher to teach these other kids. why are all staff members not familiar with the laws protecting students with disabilities? And then we questioned even the principal at that point. Why are the parents of the students with disabilities not involved in these discussions? So we felt like all of the stakeholders were involved in this. School's mission statement, we felt that this was an interesting thing, that the principal was all about full and total inclusion, but a big part of this had to do with the reputation of the classes from like the other teacher's standpoint. And so we wondered about a kind of a misunderstanding or misrepresenting what should be doing. And we also talked about the fact that equating it kind of like the student athletes that have to, like, if you want to play the sport, you've got to be able to do the sport and do the academics. Like, you have to put the time in. And if you want to like talk about all the great academic things that you're doing and that you're this bust out, honors program, you still have to do the inclusion. If you want them, you got to do them both. You got to do them full on. You can't just kind of like, do the ones that are easy for you. So Cyrus, you're going to go on to the next one. Maybe. Yeah, there you go.
I think after a year of teaching on Zoom, I'd know how to make it work. Okay, so how might the principal approach this in future meetings with her teachers? Because there were so many issues, we thought that she should bring all of her teachers and staff together so that they can collaborate, not just on this issue, but on the multiple issues that are there. And in those conversations, they need to, one, review what legal protections are there for students with disabilities, both EC and 504. I will also add in there, we didn't put this there, but in thinking about it, if students are AIG, they have a plan as well. And although that is not, I know that that is a little bit of a different process, but there are still plans and accommodations and things like that in place that need to be considered. And so it really would be a good time for the entire staff to review what those should be and how to implement those in their classroom. They also need to talk about what is inclusion supposed to look like in our school and what are some of those strategies to make that happen. Remind teachers of the supports that are available to them for students with disabilities. And the specialists need to talk with the teachers about what does that look like? What can, as a specialist, what does this look like in a math classroom? What does this look like in an English classroom? And the approach the school takes on this needs to be the one that follows the law, which means that they're providing a continuum of placements. And that begins with the general education classroom, and then they need additional data to supplement that to determine if a student needs to be pulled out for a little bit of time. Or at the high school, I know it's done a little bit different than it is at the elementary school, but that idea of a continuum has to be considered, because it might be that full and total inclusion is not the most appropriate placement for that particular student. So again, what path should she take? She needs to follow the law. Students with disabilities, as we know, they have to be placed in that LRE, that least restrictive environment. And like I was just saying, beginning with the general education classroom, and then follow the data. If additional accommodations, modifications, resources need to be put into place, then we would do that. To ensure compliance, Eugenia, her teachers and staff, they need to use PLCs to discuss student performance and to determine scaffolds and interventions for all students, as well as specific supports for students with disabilities. And we also think that she needs to listen to and consider the various perspectives of her staff, because like we've already said, she doesn't know what's going on in her classroom, or in her classrooms, in her school. If she has some teachers who have one opinion on inclusion and then others who have a different opinion, then that means that there is a serious disconnect there, and she needs to address that. Drew, you good?
Yep, I'm good. So question number 3, is there one point of view more correct than any other? what we talked about was both sides present valid points, but the law must be followed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's got to be followed. And so with that, we looked at the curriculum must be taught to all students, and they must be given access to the curriculum. So it doesn't matter if they're 504 IEP or your high flyers, they've all got to be taught the same thing. It just may differentiate how you're teaching that within your classroom. So for students with disabilities, they are being placed in the LRE and given those accommodations and modifications that are stipulated by their IEP and their 504. Teachers must consider the educational experience for all students, not just those without disabilities, with or without disabilities. Therefore, they must differentiate based off the needs of their students and accommodate multiple modes of learning. So with that, that's one thing we really talked about is, like, I remember Heather and Todd, since they're in a classroom and I'm in the gym, and it looks totally different. So for us in the gym, when we get our adaptive students, we have to change the way we do certain things with them to make sure they're successful, but it's hitting their IEP and their 504, whatever they may have at that time. So like with Todd, he teaches a little bit differently with the ELA and all of that. And Cammie does that through social studies and different things like that. So that was how we looked at it. Yes, they both make good points, but we've got to follow the law no matter what we do. All right, Cyrus. And then what we talked about here with number 4, so what kind of collaboration from the children's families might the principal and teachers propose in order to improve inclusion education programs, encourage and appreciate? So with that, we said the parents should be educated about the programs such as special education law. So like I know with this school, like when we were looking through this and like my school, which we're a middle school, but this reminded me of a Title I school. So I know you're supposed to have different things through Title I, certain nights and stuff like that. So the first time that you look at this, the very first night is parent night, you're giving out all the information. So I know at our parent night, they go and find their buses, they talk to different teachers. So like we have 2 Title I teachers, a ELA teacher who just teaches literature studies, and then we have a math connections, which is just math, focusing on that. And those students know those classes they're going to be involved in. And then through that, we send home monthly newsletters through our MTSS coordinator. She sends all that stuff out to parents, so everybody knows what that looks like. So everybody understands what's going on. And then if the inclusion program is a part of the SIT plan, ensure parents and students with or without disabilities are a part of them, not just putting the EC students or EC parents together, but it's bringing all of them together so they can see the point of what your school should be. Unlike what this principal really did, she just had a plan, but never wanted to follow that plan. And then a strategy with that would be implement a tutoring program, such as your teachers within the building or even other students within the building after school. Like they may have a friend that's a little lower in this class. Well, get them together where they work well together and can work together to better this student around, but not during the day, but it's rather outside of the school day.
All right, question 5 was asking about what the technical coordinator could do to integrate and create some harmony with those differences in opinions among the different teachers. And so the specialists, these technical coordinators really could come in and of course talk about leading professional development and making sure that teachers understand all the different methods they could use in their pedagogy, really trying to create lessons that are, of course, for the inclusion classrooms, but going to work for everybody in the classroom, for the heterogeneous mixtures, your high flyers to your low learners. And of course, if they are giving professional development to the teachers, then they are going to satisfy those concerns of all the stakeholders and making sure they're addressing those concerns. I think that, we talked about the principal being oblivious to what's going on in her school and that she's just not really aware. She's not out and about in the building. So, she needs to know if the specialists are in the rooms and doing what they need to be doing, and if they're not, making sure that they are. They should be in there modeling these lessons. I know at our school we have our specialists and our curriculum facilitators come in quite often and will lead a lesson. They'll help design lessons and create lessons, and we utilize their resources as much as we possibly can because they have been placed in those positions for a reason. And so they are the masters at what they do. So they should be used, and they should be more than just a body walking down the hallway. And then another thing that the technical coordinator could do is, conducting a survey just to gather more feedback from the different teachers about the different issues, and they could just further try to address those issues even more. Next slide. Right. And then the last question, what actions might Sylvia take with the families to make sure that they are sharing those achievements? So you could have your parent-teacher conferences, and of course, anytime you're speaking with parents, you should only be speaking about the child in the discussion, the child of those parents, not talking about anybody else. Have students create portfolios of their work, whether it's a digital portfolio or hard copies of stuff. I'm a huge proponent of hanging stuff in the classroom, even though I'm high school. I want the kids to see their work and be proud of it, and even in the hallways outside my door. And so anytime we have anybody in the building, whether it's a parent, other teachers, other students, they can see that work that's being done, and we can brag about it, and students can brag about their own work. Sharing class projects, giving them opportunities to even present projects or present things they're working on and collaborate with different community stakeholders. So maybe there's a business that needs a flyer created, or opportunities to help design things for somebody else within the community. There's many things that could be done, but they could integrate more things that are not just your basic projects within the classroom. They could filter out within the community, and then you would have more stakeholders seeing what's taking place in your classes, and that all students are being served and meeting those educational needs. And then, of course, providing information to parents about how classes are structured in the syllabus. What are you doing to address the needs of all students? How are you handling simple things like makeup work, or reteach, retest, or if you're doing test corrections, what are the different things you're offering to make sure that all students have an opportunity for that equal learning as well. I think that was it. Cyrus, was there anything else?
No, that's it.
A couple things came to my mind. I think we've kind of established what the issue is here, what the underlying issue is. Just some things that you guys mentioned in your presentation. I think that it was Todd mentioned that you're high school and you're not as familiar with what goes on in elementary school. And I know we got a lot of high school folks in this class. And it's very likely when you start out as an assistant principal that you may not be in the same level that you're in now, and that's okay. My first principalship was in a school with a very different philosophy than anything that I had ever experienced in my life. But it goes back to get out of your office, go into classrooms and observe. And yes, good teaching is good teaching. I think you would be able to see that and recognize that at any level, but you still need to be out there. You need to see what's going on with your own eyes and ask questions. One of the things that helped me the most with that staff was that I was honest about I needed to learn. I didn't know everything that was going on in there, and I asked questions, and they saw that I wanted to learn, and they helped me with that. But they still knew that I was in there watching, and I was able to start linking that learning to what I was seeing in the classroom. And so don't let that hinder you from being able to move forward. Something else that you mentioned, no one seemed to know what was going on. Go back to whose fault is that? Why did no one seem to know what was going on? And it's not the teacher's fault. Yes, everybody's at fault here, but ultimately we know who is going to be held accountable for that. You also mentioned listening to the teacher concerns. I do think that's very important. That doesn't mean you always give them everything they want, but do listen, because that's going to help you, along with what you've observed out in your building, if you start hearing these concerns, you might be able to better understand, well, okay, they're not understanding this, or I've got some tension here. It's going to help you figure out your hot spots and going to help you figure out, well, my staff, we need to spend a little bit more time with this, or I need to make this a little more clear so that people know how to move forward in our job of protecting kids and facilitating their instruction.
So I'm just going to reiterate something that Dr. Maraglia said, is that for me, my whole career, 10 years of administration, actually I think it was 13, was all high school. And then I was placed as an elementary principal. And I didn't know anything about elementary. You know, they were saying TRC, CVC, everything had an acronym. I'm like, I had no idea what they were talking about. And so I walked in the classrooms, of course, with an iPad, and it scared them to death. They had no idea. And I told them, I said, I'm learning. I've got to learn too. And I knew who my key people were. I knew my instructional coach. I knew my reading specialists that were great. I asked them to show me, tell me, let me see. And I told them that I'm learning just like you are. I can still lead. I know what good instruction looks like, but I had to be able to speak the language, and I need to know what it needed to look like when I was in those classrooms. So it's okay to ask questions and as you go forward. All right, the next group is Matt.
All right, we're going to start off here. If I can, why is it not moving through here? I have to actually click. There we go. All right, so I think we've heard a number of the key facts of this case study already from our two previous groups, but again, just to reiterate some of the contextual things with regards to this case study, we know it centers around a relatively new elementary school principal. I think that's one other important fact to note, is that this was a new principal who obviously, again, received complaints from parents about the practices of a particular teacher, with the parents complaining that this particular teacher, Sylvia, was prioritizing special needs kids over the general ed kids, putting their students, the general ed students, at a disadvantage compared to other general ed students at the same grade level in other classrooms. Sylvia, being this third grade veteran teacher, I think mentioned that she was a veteran teacher of the school, when meeting with the principal, really stood by her actions and her approaches and practices when meeting with the principal, saying that kids helping kids is a successful practice that helps all students. But as we further read, there were other instructional staff that said different things, had differing opinions about a classroom teacher's role and responsibilities in educating special needs kids, not just in an inclusion classroom, but out of inclusion classrooms as well. One thing I think that's also important to this context, and what made me think to something we looked at earlier in one of our case studies, was going back to the Leandro case, and that a key question that's posed in this case, I think also was posed in the Leandro case, and that is a sound basic education being provided to students, and specifically the general ed students in Sylvia's classroom. And so we just have to keep going back to that Leandro doctrine that we saw and talked about. I think that was case study number 2. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I believe it was case study number 2 when we talked about what constitutes the Leandro doctrine certainly has to be applied in this case as well. All right, so to answer now, again, the first question about how the principal should approach meeting with their teachers. So thinking about that, I think it's important for her to really determine the merits of the arguments that are being posed and presented by both the parents and the teachers. And determining those merits really boils down to being able to observe your teacher both formally and informally. And obviously that's something that she was not doing in this particular case. But it also means knowing the effectiveness of the teaching practices of those classroom teachers. And so that's, again, something that I think I think another group used the word she's just oblivious to. It really seems from this case study that she's oblivious to what are effective teaching practices. And so that's not going to help her be able to understand the merits of the arguments of different stakeholders. It's also important, I think, as another group said, that as a principal, you have to be able to define the roles and the responsibilities of all your staff members. You should have a clear understanding of what the general ed classroom teacher's role is, what a specialist role is, and that has to be communicated in staff meetings so that everyone is on the same page. It's certainly not appropriate to ask a non-administrative staff member, which was Ishmael in this case, to be observing other teachers in your place. That's not what their role is. So it's clear that she really doesn't have the full understanding of what each staff member, what each teacher is supposed to be doing in their school. And so when making a decision about what approach might be taken in special education and educating special education kids, the principal should be able to select an approach and be able to defend that decision when meeting with teachers. And that decision has to be made, as always, based on evidence and data from what observations she's seen in teachers' classrooms, but also in both in assessment data, but also in talking with her EC specialists. And so making a decision to implement a particular approach is going to provide the consistency and clarity that all teachers, all grade levels at the school really need to get the direction that the school needs to go in as led by the principal. And so this will also translate into there being less confusion with the parents, less confusion amongst the teachers and the students as well. And it sets a clear expectations of what sort of teaching and learning should be taking place in the classroom. All right, and to answer now question 2 and thinking about where does the principal go from here, moving forward, the principal, Eugenia, has a number of things that she has to think about and do to respond to concerns from the parents and the conflicts even between teachers. And so the first, obviously, again, as we've said, is that she needs to conduct a formal observation of this teacher as soon as possible. And the focus of this observation needs to be on how is Sylvia, the teacher, differentiating her instruction between the two sets of students. And also then determining the effectiveness of that differentiation. How effective is differentiation taking place? How is that being shown in the assessments that the teacher is giving? And following that observation, there needs to be a post-conference, a post-observation conference, where she discusses the not only the concerns of the parents, but also what strategies, what practices need to be incorporated into her classroom that meets the needs of all students. I think giving this constructive feedback is one of the really key roles of any administrator, because you have to set the tone as being the instructional leader of the school. And establishing that comes with feedback that you give to your teachers. You have to be one that fosters growth and development of your teachers. That comes when you give feedback. And that also that feedback needs to be followed up with a concrete action plan that outlines specific steps the teacher needs to take to incorporate those new strategies that you suggest to her, while also providing accountability measures, providing goals that the teacher should be meeting when incorporating those practices. And then additionally, I would say, is the principal should consider either creating, we're not sure if one is already present at the school, if it needs to be created. If not, then working with the teacher leadership team at the school. I think this is where the role of school improvement teams are really important. Having your best teacher leaders at the school collaborating and determining what practices are ones that are best for students and should be incorporated across all levels of classrooms. And so this would just, again, provide the school with the clear guidelines, well-analyzed strategies that can be implemented by colleagues and lead to successful outcomes for students.
All right. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good. All right. So question 3, we talked about, asked a question about the point of view. And with the point of view from both teachers, we said that the reason we say that this is because both point of views are on the same level, and we see that the point that all teachers are making. We feel that everyone in the school needs to be on the same page on how children with learning difficulties are being helped in school. We feel that the teachers should not try to do it all on their own and start using the specialists. So the question 4 is what kind of collaborations can be used? One of them, you can set up included classes where the regular ed teacher is teaching the class, the specialist in the class assisting the regular ed teacher. Also, when the regular ed teacher is giving independent work, the specialist can take the kids that need extra help out and reteach the lesson. One other thing, they can share a pacing guide to share with the parents so that the parents can see where their child is at all times curriculum. I was not inclusive, but I was a teacher that had an inclusion class. So what we would do is, like they said, I would go over the lesson with the students. Once I finished the lesson, we would give out the independent work. We would see if some of the students would like to go out of class and get that extra teacher if they needed, or if they needed additional help with that. We will allow that. We will let them go out, or they would stay in the class and the inclusion teacher will help. I always try to include my inclusion teacher and with the students. And I always let the parents know when I send my syllabus out that this is an inclusion class and who the teacher was that was going to be in the class with me. We always did weekly announcements with the parents, let them know what was going on in class, you know, and just so they'll be on the same page and they'll know where their child and where we was at in class. The next slide, the different types of feasance. So the MELS feasance is having the specialist go into rooms to observe classrooms instead of doing it herself. The misfeasance is demonstrating poor instructional practice for inclusion classes. And non-feasance is not being aware of what is going on in her classroom. And going into question 5, how to create harmony. Provide strategies to regular educating teachers who have students with disability in their classroom, strategies to help the classroom run more efficiently, include techniques that Sylvia is using in these strategies, give the teachers the strategies and techniques needed to help students, and provide teachers ways to communicate with special education teachers in the building. And then the last one, action Sylvia might take, invite parents to the classroom to observe and take part in classroom activities. Let the parents help the students with the activities to see how hands-on activities work in the classroom. Also, they can explain how the program works and the parts of the program, and have a meeting to explain the program better to the parents of the students. Awareness is the key to everyone understanding the program and how it works.
And then we'll end by, again, talking about these 4 key ethical paradigms. First, with justice, as we know, that incorporates the values of fairness, equity, and justice. Certainly, the principal must exercise justice by following IEPs as written and the laws that go along with IEPs. That includes everything from who is there, when meetings take place, how often meetings take place. Lots of laws that we know apply to the writing and implementation of IEPs, the care paradigm with relationship building and collaboration. Principal must show care by listening to concerns of all parties, all students, parents, teachers. In this situation, there were a number of stakeholders presented in this case study that require the principal to listen to. And that was something Dr. Maragley brought up, is that it's important to listen to all these stakeholders, because even if you don't necessarily go and make decisions that align with what they're advocating for, at least by listening, they can feel heard, and they can understand better the decisions that you end up making. With regards to critique, that means exploring both sides of the problem. It's critical that a principal has, not to use the word twice, but have a critical lens when it comes to situations such as these. Principals have to explore both sides of the issue and use facts to make informed decisions that are also based in legal requirements. And then lastly, with professionalism, a principal must use professionalism in their approach to situations such as these to ensure that IEPs and EC practices are abided by, that there's accountability for student academic success. Accountability, obviously, of the teachers is important for that, as a good principal is going to demonstrate. And then certainly professionalism is shown when there are moral and legal consequences of the decision-making process. All right, and that is it.
All right. 3 things that I jotted down as I was listening to your presentation. One thing that I want to point out that you said in the very beginning, you really were emphasizing the fact that she was a new principal. And I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, she was in her 3rd year, or she had 3 years of experience. That's irrelevant, because once you get into that principalship, nobody cares how long you've been there. There are plenty of first-year principals who have lost their job for a variety of reasons. And so, to make sure that we're all on the same page, you know now, whenever you go into an AP position or a principal position, know what's going on in your building. Think about what you're going to pay attention to. Think about what you need to address, because you can't use that as an excuse. Okay? So you know that now before you move into 604. Another thing I would just like to remind everyone of that it's kind of come up to me in a few different presentations. Again, this is about, we know what the underlying issue is here, but when we start talking about general curriculum and EC and all of that, every student in that building is regular ed first before they're anything else. But then you have some students that happen to be 504 or TD or EC. So make sure you always remember that, because I assure you, as administrators, you're going to get into that tension there with teachers who simply consider themselves gen ed, and they don't consider those EC kids belonging to them. They're regular ed first before anything else. So just always remember that, because I promise you, you're going to have that debate with a teacher at some point when you are in an administrative role. And then I also wanted to make sure that everybody does understand that the malfeasance here is much more. I'm so glad you guys pointed it out, but the malfeasance piece is much more than even what you said on your slide. It is the fact that they are breaking the law. Okay, so it's very, very serious. Again, I'm so glad you pointed that out, that you actually did give examples of each one to point that out. But I did want to just make sure everybody understands that the malfeasance here is extremely serious, because you are breaking the law. And that's my 2 cents for this group.
And I'll jump in right quick. Good catch by Cyrus on AG. If any of those upper kids are AG, you're breaking the law on them. Good catch by Will on the backside. Even if they aren't AG, the law says that they have to get a basic education. To Dr. Maraglia's point, everybody that's in that room is being malpracticed on. We're breaking so many laws that it's incredible. This is an extreme case. That's the thing about case studies. We make them so over the top, but there's no fine line here. There's no gray. I mean, every kid in that room, make no mistake, every kid in that room is being malpracticed on, but every kid in that room, we're breaking the law in what we're doing with them. It's not close. It's not, it's not Judge McCall or a coin flip or any of that. I mean, we got basic ed law, but Will said goes back to Leandro, that every kid has to get a basic education. That's not happening. AG kids, as Cyrus pointed out, EC kids, nobody. Everybody's got a contract, and we're not fulfilling any of the contracts that we have with these kids. And to Dr. Maraglia's point, before you get to 604, who knows what your next course is going to be? What is 604, by the way? Anybody know? You're going to get to spend all next semester on instruction, supervising instruction. What we talked about tonight, you might not be able to define it, but you got to know what it looks like. Guess what you're going to spend the semester doing? Learning what it looks like. That's the entire emphasis of because most important thing in schools, what do? When I turn the curve on 40 in Raleigh, and I'm going to go out to Smithfield down to 64, or going to go to Goldsboro. Before I get down to exit 314, where I get off on 64, I go by exit 306, Jones Sausage Road. You know what they do at Jones Sausage? They make sausage. You know what we do in public school? We teach kids. That's why we have school. We don't have to have a job or keep kids off the street or any of that. We have school to teach kids. And you have to know what instruction looks like. This semester, you're supposed to learn the legal basis of all this stuff. Next semester, you're supposed to learn what it looks like. How do I supervise instruction? If I was an art teacher and I'm in a physics classroom, how do I know what they're supposed to be doing? Well, there's common practices, best practices. That's the whole notion. So you're going to spend the whole semester, next semester, the fall, learning to supervise instruction as a non-expert in that area. Nobody can be an expert in every area, but you're going to learn that there are certain things that you've got to know. And you've got to know how to put together that professional development plan that we did in OMA Task 2 that came from your APTEL. We're going to learn how to build that plan on a more specific basis. I've heard need to do professional development with our teachers, but we got to know what that content, what is it we want them to know? Well, that's what you're going to do next semester. This semester is about building a legal basis behind all the things that we do. And so you're going to get a very good dose next semester with Dr. Sanders on how to supervise instruction, how to know what's going on in the room, how to recognize it when you see it. That's the whole notion here. Good job.
All righty, I think America's group is next.
Oh, there. Okay, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Oh, can somebody else share? Because of course this Mac is not cooperating with me right now. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I think Kriana's sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, I just pulled it up. Sorry.
All right.
It's getting ready to storm over here, so my Wi-Fi is moving slow. But can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so at this point, we all kind of know the summary of the case study, so we'll go ahead and jump in with question 1. How might the principal approach this in future meetings with her teachers? Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? As a leader of the school, the principal must be aware of what's going on in all of her classrooms. The principal needs to be the one making the formal observations instead of asking ORTIS to complete those formal observations. Eugenia should meet with all teachers and special education teachers to discuss their roles using the inclusion model. She should provide some sort of professional development on using the inclusion model so that teachers and students are set up for success. Like we said previously, it seems like a lot of teachers didn't really know what was going on. They were all doing different things. So if everybody is using uniform instructional strategies, that would help clear up their confusion. She also needs to offer opportunities for teachers to collaborate so that all classrooms are following the same procedures and expectations. And she needs to provide those expectations for all of the teachers. She needs to discuss the IDEA law the teachers are required to follow so that all students are educated in the least restrictive environment and that all students are being treated equally.
All right, question 2. What is the path that Eugenia should take? And we started out with Eugenia would need to do a formal observation of the teacher in question, just to get an idea of what's going on in that classroom and seeing if she can observe any of the complaints that those parents had brought up. And then she would do a post-conference with that teacher, discuss the strengths that she's seen and some areas for improvement, and then also discuss those complaints from those parents. And during that post-conference, she would give advice and probably even create a step-by-step plan on some best practices to help improve instruction in that classroom. And then as an overall for all teachers to establish those expectations for what a inclusive model classroom should look like.
Is one point of view more correct than the other? I mean, both points of view are in both interests of the student, so one is not more correct than the other. However, Eugenia should be making sure she's supervising and evaluating the inclusion model, so offering feedback to the teachers and collaboration time. Sylvia must use a different approach than having the advanced students assist the lower students and using students as teachers. She could use strategies like cooperative learning, having purposeful planning of who's working with who, or any sort of Kagan strategy. So all students are working in pairs or in groups, but all students are responsible for their own learning. Sergio values the team of specialists, but the teachers and special education specialists must work together in order for the inclusion model to be successful.
Ryan's not here tonight, so I'll be reading his part. What kind of collaboration from the children's families might the principal and the teachers propose? Early intervention services. I know at my school we do have something called the CARE team. As Dr. Caton said, we have thousands of acronyms, but a CARE team is one of our RTI before we do have to get them observed and start an IEP for them. Parents' involvement, given access to their students' data, active part of their intervention process. So letting them see what their child is learning in class, how their child is doing in class, participation in IEP meetings and help plan developments, and special education procedures such as eligibility criteria, certain mandated procedures to determine eligibility, appropriate placement for students, and develop IEPs. For the next question, as an expert in the area of learning and evaluation, what might Ishmael do? There could be PLC started within the class, within the school. I think Sylvia and Sergio could learn and lead PLCs, but just to offer information amongst each other and their teams, as it was previously mentioned. It sounds like teachers are doing different things and it's not all for the common good of their students. There should be inclusion discussions at every faculty PD. Once again, as we said, teachers should see what it looks like in each classroom, and it can actually be done. And then PDs by the integration program specialist. So they should come up with lessons that will explain and help them to learn how to meet the needs of students and offer classroom management tips so that Sylvia can start giving her students the proper assignments that will not only challenge them, but meet them at their learning needs.
Okay, what actions might Sylvia take with the families of the children in question in order to learn and share the achievements and experiences they have observed among the children? A big part of that is helping to educate parents on the particular classroom model. She can hold parent-teacher conferences, meeting with the parents to share information about their student only. There can be, she can create portfolios, have classroom displays, share achievements in a class newsletter, not particularly grades or anything, but if someone did something special, that can be shared in a newsletter, and inviting the parents in to observe a lesson, help out in the classroom, bringing them in to see what is going on and giving them a better understanding of what is happening. And that is our presentation.
So for me as a principal, I'll be very honest with you. I'm very hesitant about letting the parents come in to observe a lesson. That's just me. Because there are too many other things that they can see in that classroom. Have had parents to go back and talk about specific students that were not as high and things like that. So I would be very cautious about that. I wouldn't typically allow that. But parents think that they should be allowed. That's just me. I'm just telling you. So.
What does the data say? Anybody know? What does the data say about schools that the notion of parents coming in and being in the classroom? Do those schools typically do better or worse? They typically do worse. A lot of data that supports that notion that we shouldn't be having. If parents, you know, our job is to help parents educate their kids. If they could do it, we wouldn't have school. So you need to there's a lot of legal issues that comes with that as well. Mm-hmm. So you got to use that judiciously and very sparingly.
Yeah, I'm much in agreement, because you just open up a whole Pandora's box.
Yeah, they talk, and they, you know, that was, when I was an elementary principal, that was a common practice. When we had to try to do heterogeneous grouping, when we got into accountability in 1990, how old am I? So when we moved to accountability in 1990, when I was an elementary principal, one of the first things that we were required to do is heterogeneous grouping. But because parents had been in the building, they screamed and yelled. I had a parent call me and say, "Why is my kid in the dumb group?" And I said, "Your kid, Jimmy's in there, and everybody knows he's an idiot." And that's the kind of things that you get. And so it's not even a double-edged sword. It's only a sword with you know, toward you. So I would use that very judiciously, if at all. Kind of my summation from the case studies and from the course is, I thought of a term. I may have heard it tonight, and if I did, I don't mean to steal somebody else's idea or thought here, but I always have this one. What is a non-negotiable? I had to mute everybody. I couldn't hear. What is a non-negotiable? I heard a lot tonight about we'll do staff development and introduce teachers to some of these inclusion concepts and some of these other things. We'll just introduce these concepts, because the notion here is just because people know better doesn't mean that they'll do better. You as principal, you have the bully pulpit. You have to establish in your school what the non-negotiables are. You will do this, you won't do that. I believe in collaboration and communication and all those things, but you are the bottom line. They pay you to be in charge. That's the only reason they pay you. And you have to establish in your building what non-negotiables are going to be. And if the law, and one of the non-negotiables is we're going to follow the law, period. Nobody can give us permission to break the law. I'm not losing my house for any of you. Love you dearly. But you know, you're not going to, just like in the first case study that we had this semester. That teacher couldn't work for me. That's a non-negotiable. We cannot abuse kids that way. She did not physically abuse that kid. What she did was probably much worse than physical abuse. You cannot treat kids that way. Not in this building. That's a non-negotiable. You know, you can't threaten kids as the principal did in the third case study. That's a non-negotiable. We're here to protect all children. We can't be a part of the bullying and that's going on. We can't feed into that or allow that to happen. That's a non-negotiable. Inclusion model, EC kids, AG kids, regular ed kids, non-negotiable is we fulfill the contract that we have with every one of those children to teach them. That's a non-negotiable. So when we have professional development for our teachers, this is not, you know, this is not if you choose to do this. It'd be good if you did this. This is non-negotiable. Don't ever do professional development that's not non-negotiable. If it is, you're wasting your time and theirs as well. How many bad PD sessions have you been in your career? You know you have been. Stuff that's just good, you know, good to know is a waste of time. When we do professional development, it's because we expect to affect a change in our building. If we don't, then we don't need to be doing it. It's not professional development. It's just a way to get together and drink coffee and eat donuts and waste a little time. Your professional development needs to be non-negotiable. This is important, or we wouldn't be wasting your time with it. You've got to set in your building what your non-negotiables are. My number one is we don't abuse kids ever, and that we run school for kids and not for the comfort of teachers. Love y'all dearly. I'll buy you a shirt and buy you some priceless chicken on Friday, but we have to be here for kids. That's a non-negotiable. Has to be. You've got to determine what your non-negotiables. What hill are you willing to die on? What hill are you willing to die on? What matters that much to you? Because at some point during the interview process, you're going to be asked the question, and it's part of the Gallup series that you're going to learn about in 605 when you do Strength Finder. One of the questions you're going to be asked, are there certain things that you will never change your mind on that are non-negotiables with you? And you better have 2 or 3 handy. You better be thinking about this now. What are my non-negotiables? What are the things when somebody asks me in that interview scenario? What am I going to tell them? Am I going to say, nah, I'll just go with the flow? There's got to be 2 or 3 things that to you that are at the core of what you believe about the business, about why we're in this. And you need to sit down and spend some time reflecting with yourself. What are my non-negotiables? And if you don't have any, spend the next 2 semesters figuring that out. I'm going to turn it over to our resident. I want to thank our resident principal experts for being with us this semester. They've done a whole lot of work for a little bit of pay, but they are invaluable in providing the perspective of what it's like, the day-to-day life of what you aspire to be. They do it every day. I used to do it every day. I just train people to do it now. I'm a has-been. They're the real deal. And so I hope that you appreciate the wisdom that they have shared with you. I don't have any. I'm just old. Just because you get old don't mean you're wise. But they live it. And you've seen that passion within them. You've got to find that passion within you. That's why I'm bringing that up. You've got to find that passion. What's important to you? What are your non-negotiables? What are you passionate about? You've got to find that, because if you can't express that in an interview situation, nobody will ever hire you. Just won't. Professors, Caton and Maraglia, I'll turn it over to you to close this out.
So I just want to say I really enjoyed having you this summer. The thing about summer session is that because it's so short, we're unable to give you so many of our things that we actually do. So please feel free anytime you can email me. I'll be glad to give you anything, lots of ideas, lots of strategies. Like I said, I've been at an elementary school. I'm currently at a high school. So anything that you may need, just let us know or let me know. I'll be glad to help you in any way. I may be looking for an assistant principal soon too, just the FYI. So.
And I second all of that. And in addition, I would like to say, I feel like one of the goals of this program is, as you progress, that it helps you shift from the teacher lens to the administrator lens. And I shared with all of you earlier in the semester, when I came into this, I do feel like I was quite naive in a lot of ways, because I did come in thinking that I was going to be a champion for the teachers, and I joked and said I was brainwashed. But I do hope that this class, we have helped you continue shifting from the teacher lens to an administrator lens, because it is quite different. And you really have to be the champion for the children before anything else. And there's a lot that goes along with being a champion for the children and making sure that they are safe and that they're in a place where they can learn. And so I really do hope that we have helped you in being able to continue progressing in that shift from one lens to the next. And again, if you do ever have any questions, or if there's anything you need, even though you're moving on to 604, please don't hesitate to reach out. You still have our emails.
Get your work in. Have a good break here for the next couple of weeks before we get started. Be ready to strap it on. Dr. Sanders is going to wear you out this fall. I can promise you that right now. And remember, there's no crying in school administration. So when she gets a hold of you this fall, but when she gets through with you, you're going to know what instruction is. And I'm pleased about that. So thank you again for your participation and playing along this summer. We've had a great time. We'll see you again in the fall. Everybody be safe. Good night.